Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. This week's video is going to be a bit of a buyer beware. So if you've been following along, you can see our boat back here in the background and the trailer that we've been working on. So I called about getting tags or getting the boat registered. We plan to put a motor on it, and in my state, if you put any sort of motor, trolling motor or gas powered motor, you have to register it. If you're just going to paddle it, you don't have to register it, is my understanding. So I called the DMV and asked about registering the boat, and they said I have to bring in a hull identification number. Well, the only problem I'm having with that, or I had with that, is this particular boat that I have doesn't have a hull identification number on it. Normally, again, this is from what I understand, when you purchase a boat, somewhere on the boat is a tag with a hull identification number on it. And when you go down to register it, you take your bill of sale and your title that you got from whoever you purchased it from, and you register your boat that way. They have to have that hull identification number. So I told the person that I spoke with on the phone, I don't have a hull identification number, and she referred me to our game and fish department. So I called Game and Fish, and Game and Fish says, well, it has to have a hull identification number on it somewhere. And I said, well, it doesn't. And they asked me what kind of boat it was. And I'm going to try to keep this as straight as possible, because it even started kind of confusing me, and I'm the one dealing with it. So she asked me what kind of boat it was. This boat that I purchased had no identifying marks on it. No low or tracker or any of the, no name on it anywhere. It had been bought and sold or handed down, passed around, whatever, to the point that there was nothing on it. The only thing sticker on it, there was an old state registration number and decal on the front of the boat, but in the back of the boat, where you would normally find your Coast Guard identification and where it tells you how many people the boat's rated for and how many pounds it's rated for, and that sort of thing was gone. There was a sticker that you use to measure your fish, and there was a sticker on the back about telling you how important it is to wear a life jacket. Other than that, no identifying marks. So what she tells me when I tell her that there's no identifying marks and there's no hull identification number is that without that, there's no way for her to get me one. So I have to find out what kind of boat it is, because there are 16,000 boat manufacturers in the United States. And what they do when you don't have a hull identification number on there is you send them a picture of the boat, and then they, again, this is how I'm understanding it, is they email each one of these boat manufacturers until somebody says, oh yeah, that's one of our boats. And then at that point, they get that manufacturer to reissue a hull identification number. Then it's the buyer's responsibility to go to some place like, and this is what I was told, a trophy shop or somewhere, and get that hull identification number put on a piece of metal, and then you have to reattach it to the back of your boat. And I really wasn't clear, or I didn't understand why this was important until I went down to the DMV. What she told me was that if I told her that there was an old state registration on the front of the boat. I'm in Arkansas, so it says AR. I'm assuming if you're in Texas, it's TX. Oklahoma, I'm sure it may be OK or whatever your state abbreviation is. And then it had the state emblem on the front, and it had a registration on there. And so I called the DMV back, and at the Game and Fish's suggestion, and she said if you have one on there, they should be able to give you the hull identification number, because the person that registered the boat that particular time would have had one in order to get it registered. So I called DMV, and of course they would give me no information over the phone. And so I took a picture of the registration, the decal on the front of the boat, and I went in to the DMV, sat there 45 minutes probably, got up to talk to a young lady, showed her the picture. She was able to pull it up, but what she brought up was that what they had been doing, and this is why I guess they've changed the law in January of 2017, was that whoever registered the boat before me didn't have or before the person I purchased it from, and probably the person that they purchased it from, was that they didn't have a hull identification number. And so what the DMV had been doing in that instance was using the AR number, or the state registration number, as a hull identification number, which is not the way it should be done. Because in that case, if somebody steals your boat and there's no hull identification number on there, and they grind off or sand off your state identification registration, there's no way to identify that boat as being yours. And so January of this year, they completely changed the way they did it, or they're going to do it from here on out. And so now you have to have that hull identification number in Arkansas, or you can't get it registered. So you either have to know what kind of boat it is, the manufacturer, so they can email them or call them and try to get a new hull ID issued for it. So I get to the DMV, like I said, I show them the old registration. They pull it up. She tells me that the old hull number was the AR number. And so I said, well, does it, what other information is on there? Does it tell you what kind of boat it is? Well, in this instance, she told me it was a 1999 Waco. So I took that information. I called Game and Fish back, and there is I guess they've got a grandfather date where if the boat was made before a certain time, they'll send you a form, you fill it out, send it back into them, and then they will issue you a hull identification number for your boat. So one of the ways, or one of the things you have to do, is have a game warden or game official come out, look at the boat with you, and then they go back, do the paperwork, and then issue that hull identification number. So she transferred me to a gentleman in the division there. And I told, I went over told him the same information, that the hull ID that was used was the AR number, and he of course said that wasn't right. And I told him what they told me about it being a 1999 Waco, and he asked me a handful of questions. Is it a riveted boat? Yes. And that immediately made it not a 1999. Apparently at some point in the early to late 80s, boat manufacturers stopped making riveted boats just because they leak, which they do leak. Obviously, I'm dealing with a few leaks in this boat now. So they went to a more all-weld boat, and so that immediately throws it, making it an earlier model boat. So he asked me to send him a couple of pictures of it. I sent him a complete side view and a back view of the transom. Within an hour, he called me back and told me that it was not indeed a 1999 Waco, but a 1969 Eldercraft. I believe I'm saying that right, and I'll have to look that up again to make sure. So instead of thinking I have a 99 boat, I actually have a 1969 boat, which is kind of cool because that's the year I was born. So, it's a 48-year-old boat, which is kind of neat. So anyway, long story short, he sent me out a piece of paper that has a handful of questions on it. I basically answer them. It's like length of the boat, how you plan to propel the boat, what kind, what size motor, that sort of thing. Send in a side view picture and a complete view of the transom, and then they will reissue me that hull identification number, and then I go get that made, and then I can take it go back to the DMV with that information and get it registered. So I bought this boat off the Facebook market, so that's one thing I would, people tend to get hung up on having titles for the trailer. But this could be just as big a headache here trying to get a boat registered without a hull identification number. So if you're out there looking at a used boat, either on Craigslist or Facebook, that may be one of the things you want to look at before you buy it, is to make sure it has that on there. I'm not saying don't buy one if it doesn't have that on there, but just understand if you get a aluminum boat and you're doing a tiny boat project like my son and I are doing, that there are going to be some extra steps. It was a handful of phone calls and one trip to the DMV, but it was not anything near as frustrating as it can be to get a car registered. So I dealt with 3 different people, and for the most part, they understood what they were talking about and were able to guide me and tell me the things that I needed to do without referring me on to, call this person, you got to call this person, and then that sort of stuff. So just buyer beware. If you are buying a boat, you want to make sure it does have that hull identification number on there. And this is my understanding that this is, from what I'm understanding from Game and Fish and DMV that this is not something they've handed down, but this is something the Coast Guard requires. And so to get a boat registered, these are some things that the Coast Guard is requiring, and they're really cracking down on it to make sure people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So once I get everything taken care of, and I'll update the video and let you know how it went at the DMV and if I had any more problems. So that's this week's video. If you want to follow along in the project, we're going to try to get a coat of paint on the trailer this weekend, and then get the rest of the boat sanded. We have a few spots left to sand on that, and then try to get some primer and some paint on that, and then get started on the build on the inside. If you want to keep up with the project, you can click the subscribe button down below. And if you like this video, you can hit the thumbs up. If you are in the state of Arkansas and you've had similar problems or have any information that you'd like to share, please put it down in the comments. If there's anything that could help me or save me some time at DMV or dealing with the Game and Fish, I'd appreciate it. Thanks. We'll see you next time.